Mixing is one of the most overcomplicated topics in all of YouTube when it comes to music production. But what I'm going to do is share one of the most powerful concepts in mixing that has made an enormous difference in my music, and I believe is going to make an enormous difference in your music as well. I'm not saying this is the catch-all. I'm not saying this is the one thing that if you do this one thing, then like magically your mixes will sound incredible. I'm saying that this is a very helpful thing that will help your mixes take multiple steps better. And that is balance. Now, before you jump off the video thinking you know where this is going because you think, oh, you're gonna talk about how to like make a balanced mix. Actually, I'm gonna be saying the opposite of that. Because the truth is that balanced mixes are boring mixes. Great mixing engineers do not mix things to be balanced. So in this video, I'm gonna be taking a look at two separate songs, both of which you can go listen to on any platform that you listen to music so you can hear the full context if you so choose. All music that I've produced and mixed myself, because I think it's actually good when people on YouTube show the stuff they actually work on. Now, before we jump into these sessions, we need to start by defining balance, because this word gets thrown out a lot and people talk about balance, and what we need to talk about is specifically what we mean when we talk about balance and what I mean when I say that balanced mixes are boring mixes. When we think of the word balance, typically balance means the same, right? Like if you're on a teeter-totter and you have one person over here and one person over here and one person's heavier than the other person, then guess what? That teeter-totter is going to be out of balance. And so when people think of balance, the problem with using the term balance is we think that means the same. And that is not what balance should be. And this is the problem with terminology. Balance means equal. But when we're talking about balance in the context of a mix, you don't want things to be equal. In fact, you really want the opposite of equal. And what I'm talking about is creating a hierarchy of sound or a tier of sound. You want to have certain things that are going to stand out against other things. If everything is the same, if you have vocals and drums and bass and keys and synths and guitars and strings and whatever elements you have within the context of your particular production, and everything sounds the same, you know what that is? That's gonna sound boring, it's gonna lack clarity, it's gonna lack definition, it's gonna actually lead your listener to feel like, I don't know what I am supposed to be listening to right now. Now, this should go without saying, but apparently it doesn't. Your productions should already sound amazing before you ever even get to the mix stage, so I'm just throwing that out there. If your stuff sounds bad before you mix it, this isn't gonna help. This is why you should always produce music as if mixing does not exist. So when we're talking about tiers, it's really important to know that when you're working with vocal music, for example, your vocals need to be the loudest element in your production, at least from our ears' perspective. We're not talking about decibels. We're not talking about math equations. We're talking about how things sound to our ears. Because more often than not, what I've noticed is two specific things end up not being mixed appropriately when it comes to volume and when it comes to the tiers of the hierarchy of sound. The first is vocals. More often than not, amateur producers or aspiring producers and learning mixing engineers, they have a tendency to mix vocals far too quiet. Don't worry, I'm gonna be showing examples here. I'm gonna be showing what it sounds like if you do this. Stick with me. The second part is if the drums are pushed way too far back. Now, there are times where the drums need to be pushed a little further back, and that is a creative choice. So everything I'm saying here right now in this video, we are talking about a creative endeavor. There are creative choices, and there is leniency for all sorts of different things. So do not take what I'm saying as black and white truth, but instead take what I'm saying and learn how to apply and grasp these concepts. You grasp this and then apply it, it'll make a difference. If you're just gonna take this and then just smack it onto whatever you're doing to do it exactly as I'm doing, you're not actually grasping this. You as the creator, as the creative, needs to approach your mixing through the perspective of a hierarchy. What do we want our listeners to be paying closest attention to in every single moment? And now the good thing is that this is creative, right? Like we can all have our different perspectives. I might prefer the piano pushed up a little bit louder. You might prefer the guitar pushed up a little bit louder. And that's why different people mixing the exact same thing, it's going to sound different. And I'm not just talking about EQ and compression and reverb and delays. I'm actually talking about the way in which you utilize the fader is going to be different because different people are going to want to hear different things. This is the beauty of it, because I, as the person creating this, I, as the person engaging in the mix of this particular thing, get to decide what I want you, as the listener, to pay attention to. I want to be able to draw your ear into certain things, but there are certain things that you should draw attention to more than other things, and this is kind of a standard approach. The very first, like I said, is vocals. Your vocals should be front and center. It's actually very uncomfortable to listen to songs where the vocals are mixed too quiet. The second thing is that typically your drums should also be one of the louder elements. If you listen to pop, if you listen to EDM, if you listen to a lot of the music that I do, which is a little bit more in the alternative pop genre, if you listen to rap or hip hop, just about every single genre, instead of certain genres, maybe like folk music, for example. I do know that folk music tends to push drums a little bit on the quieter side, or even jazz, for example. So again, this is not black and white. There are certain genres that are going to approach things slightly differently. But in most broad genres, in most bigger genres, drums are going to be one of the louder elements. And I can just tell you, if the drums are not loud enough, it's uncomfortable. If you're listening to rock music and the drums are not banging loud, it feels weird. And there's certain things that we have grown accustomed to. So what happens is, if you are balancing things, again, I'm using the word balance, right? If you're putting things equally in terms of the mix, it's not gonna have clarity or definition. It's not actually pulling your ears in a specific direction. Whereas if you have a hierarchy or a tier of things, you're gonna have vocals up here. You might have drums and bass next. You might have your other elements here, and then you might have some of the auxiliary type things at the bottom. That is a better approach to creating a great sounding mix, because it's actually helping your listener know what to be thinking about and what to be focusing on. If you don't know what to listen to, if you don't know what you're focusing in on, it's way more likely that people are going to skip it and move on to a different song. Let's see this in action. All right, this very first song is a song of mine called Our Fight. But what I want to do is take you to verse 2 in this song, because this is where we have a little bit more going on instrumentally. So I just want to play a little bit of this first so you can hear what we're looking at.
We are living in a crisis. It's like the Allies and the Axis. There is no right or wrong. Be quiet right along. We are the blind leading the blind to our anthem song.
Okay, so just in that moment, just in what we listened to as a smaller section here, very clearly the vocals are the most dominant element in this particular mix right now. So what I want to show you is the way that oftentimes we hear mixes from our students. And again, this is not all my students, so I'm not throwing all my students on the bus. I just want to be very clear here, not throwing my students on the bus. I'm just saying, generally speaking, when we're listening to mixes where this is an issue, I want to show you where the vocals actually usually sit. I'm just going to use the gain tool here, so I'm not actually touching the fader since this mix is already finished. So I'm turning this down right around 4 dB. Let's just take a listen to how big of a difference this makes.
We are living in a crisis. It's like the Allies and the Axis.
So just that by itself, you can already hear, now all of a sudden the vocals are getting pushed far enough down to where you're almost like having to really think like, what am I listening for right now? This is what I mean when I'm talking about balance, right? Like if you want things to all sound equal, if you want the vocals to sound the same as the instrumental, then that's about where it's at. But that's not what you want. So let's actually put this back, which is turn this up by about 4 dB, and listen to the difference.
We are living in a crisis. It's like the Allies and the Axis. There is no right or wrong. Be quiet right along.
That in and of itself makes such a big difference. So what I want to take you to now is the final chorus, where we have some bigger vocals as well as drums. And I'm going to show you what happens when we push the drums too far down. All right, so this is the chorus.
It's time to rise. It's time to fight. Lift up your eyes.
Again, very clearly the vocals are heavily on top of this entire production. So one more time, I just want to show you what happens if we turn the vocals down too far. Let's go 4 dB again.
It's time to rise. It's time to fight.
Back to back now, turning back up.
It's time to rise. It's time to fight.
Even in the context of a production where there's a lot happening, right? We've got choir, we've got brass, we've got strings, we've got synth, we've got drums, we've got bass. There's a lot happening. The vocals are still very much on top. Let's take a look at the drums now, because the drums are the next big thing, that if you turn the drums down too far, it's going to just lose a crazy amount of energy. Let's go 4 dB again.
It's time to rise. It's time to fight.
Again, that was about 4 dB. We put this back up and it just instantly, there's more energy and it sounds so much better.
It's time to rise. It's time to fight.
So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about drums and vocals, and we're talking about making sure there is a hierarchy of sound. All right, that brings us to the second song that I want to take a look at, and this is a very different song stylistically. This one is certainly a little bit more on the pop side, which I really want to show you because the approach is slightly different. All right, it is time for us to jump into the second song, and this is a song of mine called Jaded. This song is certainly less dark, it's a little bit more uplifting, it's a little more on the pop side as well. And this is why everything that I'm saying so far and everything that I've been talking about in this video is a conceptual thing that you need to actually grasp and understand and think through how it applies to your music and your specific song, because not every song is going to require the exact same treatment. What you're going to hear in this song is the vocals are significantly more present and the drums are actually pushed a little bit further down. And I think it'll make a little bit more sense once I show you this. So let's just listen to this last chorus where everything's in.
Tell me, why are you so jaded, making everything complicated? Tell me why you feel so lost and alone.
The very first thing is that very clearly the vocals are the loudest thing that your ears are drawn to in this particular mix. The next thing is that the low end, the bass, is really kind of giving this whole track a big hug, so to speak. It's pretty loud. The bass element is pretty loud. And then the drums and the strings and the keys are kind of that third layer, if you will. Nothing here is quiet, just to be clear, and it's because there's a lot less happening in this particular production. On the last song that I showed you, the instrumental by itself is enormous. There's a lot of different layers. There's strings, there's brass, there's the drums, there's multiple layers of the drums. There's all the elements in that particular song. This song has significantly less, and you can see it just from here. This right here is the entire instrumental. And so if we listen to the instrumental by itself, you'll notice that there's a lot less happening. Really, this whole entire instrumental is keyboard, strings, bass, and drums. That's it. So the more elements you have, the more you're actually having to push things down to make sure there is room for the elements that you do want people to hear. The fewer elements you have, the more equal, I don't actually mean equal, but the more things can actually stand out individually. So if we listen to just the instrumental and we exclude the vocals, think through what are you hearing and what are your ears drawn to? First of all, to me, the bass is pretty doggone loud, but it's not loud in a way where you're like, oh my gosh, the bass. The next thing I'm really hearing is the strings. And part of that is because the strings are in a higher register. So it's naturally gonna stand out because it's in a higher register. The pianos are actually under the strings. If you really listen to this, the keyboards are pushed a little bit further down opposed to the strings. And then the drums are really kind of filling everything up from a rhythmic standpoint. Now the drums are not nearly as hot, as poppin' as they were in the previous song, and that was on purpose. The one big thing that I want you to take away from this video is that when you are making decisions, when you're utilizing the fader to determine where things are positioned in terms of this tiers of sound, or the tiers or hierarchy of sound, it is best to have motive. If you don't have motive, if you don't have a purpose or a reason behind doing what you are doing, it's way more likely that the outcome that you end with is not gonna be what you desire. If you go into it thinking, I want my vocals to be the most important thing, then I want the next thing to be the next most important thing, and then I want this other element to be the most important thing. You can start placing things in terms of a tier in a hierarchy mentally before you ever actually jump into doing it within the context of the song. The vocals in this particular song are actually even louder than they were in the last song. And part of that is because the vocals are by far the most important thing on this song, because this song has a little bit more of a pop element, and I want you to be really paying attention to what I'm saying and what I'm singing. On the last song, it's really more of a vibe. It's really more of an aggressive, I want this whole thing to just sound enormous. And so the vocals, though they are loud, they're not quite as loud as this particular song. I want to do something very similar to what we did before, and that's push the vocals down to show you how much of a difference this makes. So this is pushing all the vocals down by about 4 dB again, and we're gonna listen to how much of a difference it makes once we start pushing this back up.
Tell me, why are you so jaded, making everything complicated?
Push it up.
Tell me why you feel so lost and alone. I know you always feel so naked, and everybody knows you hate it.
A 4 decibel difference makes a huge difference in how we are hearing this song. It's not that you can't hear the vocals. It's not that the vocals aren't there. It's that the vocals are just not popping out as much to stand out very clearly on top of the whole mix. And if you're wanting to actually see me create a production from start to finish and showing you exactly what goes into making a song that's actually ready to be mixed in the first place, you should check this video out right here. I'll see you there.